Good day, everybody. Welcome back to the Building India podcast. This is obviously the cool show that we bring some of the best entrepreneurs in the country to let everybody know how they went on the process of building businesses. And today I'm extremely happy to have Sandith on the show. And trust me, he's somebody I really admire and respect because this man actually has done hard things in hard times in a hard place. Sandith, can you please give us a brief glimpse of what you've done and what you've been building with NavAlt over the last so many years? I'm a big fan, obviously.
Okay, yeah, thank you. So, what we do is like decarbonizing marine transport. So, what we try to do is started with small boats and make it electric with an ultimate goal and vision to achieve a cleaner and quieter ocean, which is our broad vision. So, we started with boats and public transport boat in as an object. So, it might sound very counterintuitive that we start with a large one to begin with, because when we are setting up a hardware startup or when we are setting up a hardware product, the challenge is to get that product market fit, and then so difficult to enter a space where it is the scale of the product itself needs to be there to achieve the economics, right? So prior to starting NavAlt, we had done some experiments on smaller boats in like tourism boat or even fishing boat. That was like to test the idea or to see if there is a product market fit. But we realized that achieving technology is different. Achieving economics is different, right? And both may not go together. And typical engineers,
You had an IIT degree
yes.
and you have an MBA from the same school instead. Did both those degrees help you get the product market fit faster?
I don't know. For IIT for sure helped me design good boats for sure. And the experience of post IIT in Korea, Japan, etc. Gave the technical know-how. And MBA for sure gave me the confidence and the skill set required to run a company. At least I was sure post or just before MBA that is one of my core weakness, and MBA has helped me solve that. Also, obviously the classmates you get in a good school, like as you said NCR, give you also the confidence to do something what you want to do or build something on your own. So in that sense, yes, but for achieving product market fit, you need something more than that, which you don't get from a university degree for sure. You need to get that from the market, the feedback from the market. So when I set out, it was not the day one I knew that it is solar boats. So I knew it is going to be some different boats and efficient boat. So how to get that efficiency? Initially, I thought it's design. I soon realized just design was not enough. You need to do something more. Then you need to also add the source of energy, which is renewable. So which this came later, not on the day one I started. So the product market fit is something you really need to do a lot of iteration to achieve. I don't think there is a standard template or answer which one can translate from one product to another that easily is my feeling, but my experience is based on a very limited viewpoint. Obviously, somebody who have done a lot of startups or understand a lot of startup may have a better bird's eye view. But this is what I feel like, yeah.
But just to take one step back, as a kid, were you always interested in boats?
Not as a kid, I would say. Somewhere around 10th or 11th grade. Actually, the only closest link to anybody who has business in my family and also somebody who has some related to shipping was my brother-in-law. Currently, he's not alive. He passed away. But he had given me some exposure in my 10th, 11th grade on shipping and ships. And I think in hindsight, again, these are things in hindsight, I think that would have left some influence in me to choose naval architecture in the IIT as a choice of stream. Whereas I would have had few more options. Typically, IIT, you decide a branch based on your JE rank.
Right.
But within that also, you might have few more options. And I I shifted to NavAlt, probably with my brother-in-law's discussions and all I had at that time is what I would think. Yeah.
It's very strange, Pushkar. I'll tell you. I met him maybe 8 years back, 9 years back, for first time. And the two things that struck out is, hey, he said naval architecture, and my uncle was a professor at CUSAT, and he's known him for a lot of the period of time. Second is he went to the same alma mater. And I was like, this is kind of strange because I don't normally meet people, and that was in Kerala, in Trivandrum, and we had these two commonalities.
Wow.
Yeah, that's true. Not many INSEAD alumni are there in Kerala. I agree.
And people from Naval Arc who knew my uncle.
Yeah.
But yeah,
No, Dilip sir is a very well respected person in the industry. And I think any NavAlt who have practiced in Cochin or Kerala would have had some interaction with him, and I think all of them would leave that same positive impression about him being a very knowledgeable person, a very helpful person. So I think that must be with anybody who have interacted with him. Yeah.
He taught you at IIT?
No, but post IIT here in Cochin, any such projects, government, he is usually the advisor on the government side, or any consulting where we think that our knowledge is not sufficient. So he's a go-to person. So yeah, it was that way. Yes.
But tell us something about studying naval architecture at IIT, because it's not a conventional engineering choice, right? It's a slightly left wing. Most people would do com science or mechanical, electrical. Like, how was studying? Like, what was naval architecture about? What did they teach you?
So NavAlt, it is all about learning how to design and build ships. And in our time, as you said about Chomsky, and in my batch of, at least I'm hoping my friends who are of my IIT batch who are listening would realize that most of the two extreme branches, which is Chomsky, the JE rank closes at 50, IIT Madras. And the other extreme are these NavAlt, Civil, Meta, and other guys, right? So who are like 1,000 odd. So these are the two branches who are the most less oriented towards academics, I would say, relatively. IIT is always, there is a lot of competition, stress, etc. But these two extreme branches were more interested in sports, culture, and other things, apart from the regular acad. So when I say this, it's not that the typical college that there is no acads. That's not the case. But based on IIT standards, the difference was very stark. And yes, there were a lot of things I would learn from the IIT exposure, even though I say that a lot of my effort was in learning many other soft skills in a good environment, right? So both INSEAD and IIT give you that good environment. So acads is one part, but it also gives you the exposure to the best brains in the country in case of IIT, and in the world in case of INSEAD with that background. So that gives you very humbling experience for me. At least that was for me. So when you are from a small place, so I was from VSSC Central School, right? So in that small cocoon, you tend to think that you're a top.
yeah.
You go to IIT, you realize that everyone there is a top
School
from there
topper,
on.
yeah.
So then you realize, and then when you meet some of the brilliant minds in computer science guys, you realize, okay, the way they think are totally different. So it's the same. So that was for me the big learning experience in both these institutions. For sure, acads, IIT gave me the framework for letting me practice the subject I studied and then proceed on to that and make a career and make an impact. So for sure
That's very unique, right? I mean, a lot of people during that era specializing in the same sort of discipline after you get out. Of course, you understand from a computer science point of view, but other disciplines, all of these IT services guys were hiring people across disciplines among top engineering schools. So it's very, that reluctance to go into somewhere where the grass is greener is always alluring. There's more money out there. You have an ID tag, right? And I can share your viewpoint on this because I felt very intimidated when I was in INSEAD the first 2 weeks to a month, where suddenly you feel that, hey, I'm really a fish out of water. I'm not used to it. But yeah, I completely agree with that.
in my times in IIT, it was mostly the US. So it's like 90-95% were all going for the studies in
Well, the master's.
US. That was, so software has just begun to.
But you never thought about doing a master's in US?
Naval, no, not at that time of IIT time for sure. So I was very clear I want to go to port building and shipbuilding. The challenge I faced was I didn't have any of my preceding 4 year seniors who went into the field. Everyone was doing MS. So every single person, even my batchmate, I was the only one who was going into the brand subject.
Also, everybody else was writing, your seniors were writing their GRE and then going to the US.
2 years.
Wow.
I think couple of people, 2 or 3 people went to software in India, but I was odd. So even to get a brand job was so difficult. So I had to ask the professors to get, because the companies don't come because you don't expect that, and there was no placement for brand jobs. So then I had to scout for a small shipyard in Gujarat, Alcock Ashdown, very small yard. But my professor gave me the advice that if you go to a small yard and you start a job there, you get a perspective of the entire vessel, of the entire boat or the ship, what you're building. Whereas you go to a big shipyard, you tend to be stuck in a small corner, a small part of the ship. And so you don't get that holistic viewpoint, which I also recommend to anyone who asks me on the career path. Start in a small place, get a big picture, and then go to the large. So 2 years, then I went to the largest shipyard in the world, right, in Korea, Japan. So then you get the different kind of exposure, the best technology. So, but then you already have a perspective on that holistic view, because IIT or any engineering school gives you a limited perspective on the real, what happens on the commercial or actual ground. Right? That's the reality even today. I don't think that has changed much. There are some ways things have changed in terms of internship and other things, but overall, still academics, there is still certain weakness, right? So, but given that this exposure to small yards give you that perspective, and then you can go to any other streams. Is just my
This is like the same advice that a lot of people give people who want to get into startups. You want stability, you have certain skills, you might want to consider getting into startups which are growing, funded a lot. But if you want to learn and you want to learn fast, start in a place where you get to do a lot of those functional things, understand the chaos, so that you probably become better at building a startup on your own, or really understanding what are your strengths to kind of move to the next level, right? So
true. That is true. I think that is a good analogy in terms of entrepreneur who has some thoughts of entrepreneurship. This might be a good path to work in some place like where you get that exposure, not functionally go to a well-funded startup. Then the things are different. Then you are,
everything is process-wise.
they're already ready for the big company journeys. Non-funded startup is a good place to go.
I have another very, I would like to pick your brains. I worked in Japan in the first part of my career. How was it working in Korea and Japan? I know there are pinnacles in terms of shipbuilding in those days, but how was it culturally for you to go and work in these markets where you don't know the native language and you have to prove the fact that, hey, listen, I'm coming from India, but I still know naval art and understand stuff. Must have been very difficult, right?
So, language, yes, for sure. For interacting with them, local language is important, but functionally, English was sufficient to manage many of the things. But there are some distinct cultural difference between India and Korea, Japan. Korea, Japan is more or less similar in at least the shipbuilding part. That is what I know. So, if you want to get something done by the people who build, and you're very clear what to do, that is a place to do, because they will follow exactly what the orders. Right? So if it's a working workers, you have a document saying what you need to do, it will be followed. And the culture of the work culture is also, if it's 8 o'clock work means 7:45 they are already warming up and getting, that's the culture there. So it's a very different. In India, if you don't know exactly what to do and you want to trying to figure out, India is better. Because Indian workers, it's an inherent, if you are lazy, you may come up with a better way. Okay, that is what I feel like. So if you...
So Jugaad has been over-glorified a little bit.
Jugaad, I am also not very great fan of Jugaad, but you will try to figure out a solution. Indian workers, I think, are a bit more smarter in that sense. They are not so... it's like they are not process oriented. They are like Korean people. They just follow the orders, get what you want. But if you are not figured out what to do, you are trying at options, I think Indian people are better. So if you are more into R&D, but the reason why we lack in R&D is a different reason. There's no funding. That is a different. I'm saying from a cultural framework, I think it's better that our kind of, we always find solutions. But I don't believe Jugaad as a good lasting solution because it's a temporary solution.
Yeah, you're not striving towards perfection, excellence, right? You're cutting corners.
Yeah, you're cutting corners. So temporarily, okay, but you need to spend time on alternative viewpoints, solutions. There, I think Indian mindset is good, but unfortunately, the ecosystem or other things are missing in terms of R&D and other things. So I find that as a big difference between Korea, Japan versus India, and they're very strong in that. Planning is strong. Why they're able to do even with high labor costs? Korea is supposed.
Which years you were in Korea and Japan?
2001 to 2006.
Same period as I was in Japan, 2000.
So almost 20 years ago.
Yes, and also in 2011-12 also in Korea again I went for a project.
But now has Indian shipping caught up with what Korea was 20 years ago?
No.
Not yet.
Nowhere. Even the largest shipyard in India still produces in a year less than one of their big shipyards. Not even, there are many big shipyards produce in a day or a couple of days. So that the scale is totally different.
Would you have any numbers like how tonnage wise how much Korea produces in India?
Korea, so percentage wise, if you see tonnage wise, Korea is about 40% of the world.
Wow.
35 to 40% of the world. India is couple of 1-2%, nowhere near.
And China has caught up in the last 20
China
years.
is like 45-50%
Of the world.
of the world.
So basically, China and Korea put together is 75% of the world.
Yeah, at Japan also is like 90% of the world shipbuilding.
It's incredible, right?
Yeah, those three countries have. So when I was in Korea, that is when the China was beginning to take over the orders, you can say. China was like 15-20%. And Korea was number 1, 45. Japan was 35. Somewhere in that number.
So was it because there was technology transfer, or rather Hyundai going into China and building in China? How did the Chinese become so good at
Koreans,
shipbuilding?
like any other industry which they have taken over by, I wouldn't use the word copying. Some reverse engineering, some experiences of, even Chinese are big ship owners, ordering, and so going from smaller size to bigger size. And there is a trust. Government also offered a lot of incentives for shipbuilding to shift to China.
And it's also a very strong geopolitical message that you send, right? Once you're becoming a big shipbuilding country, means you kind of control global trade and you have that military might as well, right?
Military that is the one reason why US still have some shipbuilding left, is because they want to still build aircraft carriers, right? So
It's a strategic interest here.
Strategic
For
investment,
any
yeah.
big country.
yeah, that's true.
But like usually when we think about shipbuilding, of course it is heavy engineering, and we also think of it as very high tech. It's not something like making shoes or making garments, something that China has done to a great extent. But in your opinion, is shipbuilding, does it also require very high precision, very high level of engineering, or is it more like low tech but heavy engineering, big scale, but technology is not very.
So
It's not like building a 747 or a
Yeah.
A380.
Not building like
In terms of the number of parts and all that, it's not that complicated,
So
right?
ships, again, probably you have to classify maybe in 2 groups. One are very simple vessels like a bulk carrier, tanker, even to extent container. These are simpler vessels, which may fit into more or less what you said of easy to build category with less technology play. But the technology play comes in when the same vessel is much bigger, like container 20,000 TU, which is the world's largest container, 24,000 TU. These are really massive vessels. There you have lot different problems and different technology play. But by and large, these are 3 group of vessels which are 70-80% of the commercial ships, which are low technology. Then there are a second group of vessels which are LNG and other or offshore vessels, complex vessels. It needs very strong technology play for construction. But in both of this, there is another layer of technology play in terms of systems and equipments, machinery, right? So as a shipyard, you may choose not to venture into that part of it, technology play, by making sure that you import those components and build. Like China, when they started out, they would have started with all the machinery and equipment systems from Europe and Korea, Japan, and just build that low-tech vessel, start with bulk
Just
carrier,
assembling
tanker.
it.
Just assembly. Exactly what most of our shipyards in
Yeah, like the knockdown kits for cars.
knockdown kit, again, you assume that something is coming for the building. I'm just saying the systems you're importing, components, but you build the steel and everything locally. So that's the starting path, even for China. So even when that's when the shift was happening, Korea shipyards were very wary of the drawings and other things going out.
The blueprints going out,
Yeah,
basically.
blueprints going out. But that was happening. Obviously, there must be some other incentives and play at work. People were shifting the knowledge and other things. So the path followed by many shipyards is start this way. Just build the low-tech vessels. Only build the vessel, not the systems. Then go to complex vessels in one direction. Also the system-wise in parallel. So Indian shipyards, at best they are doing the other ways and just going up by the complex vessels but not system side. So there is no effort in building the systems and machineries in India by the Indian shipyards for sure. But there are certain vendors who are trying to do indigenization and other things, but largely Navy is driving that. Navy is incentivizing people to build this core technology. We have seen the experience in the latest, whatever the war we had with Pakistan, where the importance of indigenous technology was very clear. So, like, for example, the aircraft carrier we built here in India, the gas turbine was still imported, right? It's a GE gas. Although there's a lot of talk of indigenization, there practically it's a GE gas turbine. So can we get a gas turbine engine in India? This is a core problem, which is an aircraft problem, or is it a
How long would it take, like, let's say, if government or any private company start investing money today that we have to build an indigenous gas turbine? Will it take 10, is it a 20-year journey?
It's a 10 to 20 year journey is what I would, because material technology and few things are, when we talk of any of this hardware startups and other things, right, we are still talking of the application level. One level is the product level and the further level is all the material and what goes. This is much difficult problem. Is it like basic science, material technology?
They don't
We
produce
are-
enough engineers to do that.
It's
Why are we lacking?
very long-term players. See, unless as a nation there is an incentive for R&D, and you can see how R&D budget even the government of India spends, or Indian companies. You look at Indian entities, how much percentage we spend in R&D.
Yeah, the
I don't
R&D
blame
percentage that we spend is like sub 1%, right? When it should be at about at least 2 to 4%. Compared to
Good
lot-
companies are 5-10%. Then only you can really build a cutting-edge product. Otherwise, you are still, at best, you do an application level, right? So you are not doing. So India is far right from government, or even you take any leading company, right? Whether if you own software, you take TCS, Infosys, anybody. Hardware also, none of them have building that second or third level, right? So whether it's software or hardware. So that play as a nation, we are far behind, I think. And that it can't come or it can't be solved by one person, one company.
Sure.
It has to be the government itself has to have that incentive. And
I think I mean, like you talked about Japan and Korea. I think there's one part which is government, and the other part is that there is that adherence and striving for excellence and that collective consciousness that we have to work together to get better as well, right? I mean, we always often talk about the rise of Korea, rise of Japan. They would not have done it in silos. They came together. Look at these Kiritsu companies or look at Japan after the war. They came collectively saying that we have to build the best automobile. We got to take the Americans on. So that sort of a cultural mindset is what we need, right?
even our customers also, we talked about Jugaad a bit back, right? So the customers also should be willing to pay for value, right? A good product. Then companies also, it's a chicken and egg situation. It's not, that's why I say it's not, can be solved by one person, one company. So
We will shift the entire cultural mindset.
yeah, the whole economy, whole country has to shift in that direction. But When I
Does
say
it
that,
happen once you become a bit richer? Like, is India a bit too poor?
you
for
can
that?
only become rich by that.
By doing this.
I don't think you can become rich and then start doing. So I don't think the way we are doing today, the claim what government says that we will become developed nation by 2047, we'll achieve by what we are doing today, for sure. So we have to do something different.
I think their criterion is also very different to developed country. Like there's a GDP per capita measure, and they say if we hit that, let's say $10,000, we become a
That was
developed
very
country.
superficial, right? Because you have to look at
Yeah.
social index, health index, distribution of.
No, will we even achieve that? I mean, I have my serious doubt. Will we really achieve that? Even that 10,000.
So 20 years we can if we continue growing the service economy, but we will never be an industrial superpower or a manufacturing or a cutting edge technology country. See, you can build a decent sized country through service, outsourcing, doing low end work.
But
But
you have
there's a limit.
Yeah, so that's again going back to what you said. You have to build competency, patents, R&D to really be pathbreakers in the world because people are licensing out your technology, and then you have scale, right? You're just not putting people to make more money or people. So I have a very see, we were like destinedly we're related. When you decided to start a business, of course it is very different from what it is today. Entrepreneurship is very it's sort of very mainstream. But when you decided to start, what did it feel like? Did that task feel very daunting? Number one, you were attempting to build a business in Kerala. At that particular point in time, not the most friendliest place to start a business. Of course, a Cochin shipyard existed. You have a mentor network, etc. That was good. But you were attempting to start a business. Like you said, your uncle was entrepreneurial. Like I had two uncles. I have two uncles in my family who are entrepreneurial. But there's still a big social stigma in terms of, are you sure what you're going to do? You have a world class, you've got two world class degrees. Are you really sure what you're going to do? Did people call you mad? I got called mad, etc. and all the family. This guy's gone off the rails. But how was it for you? That initial first 2, 3, 4, 6 months?
So, one from my perspective, I will tell. So, by definition, entrepreneurs overestimate their probability of success,
Absolutely.
and which means that you tend to like what Steve Jobs said, right? A distorted sense of reality, right? So you tend to think that all that failures of others is not going to happen to you. So which means you are overestimating your probability of success. So
We always think it wouldn't happen to us.
yes, so we are always above average. We don't form the average.
But if everyone is above average, who is average? Yeah, correct.
So this,
But then that's when the ego goes for a toss later after you just start.
in a way, that to my mind is also the single biggest characteristic of an entrepreneur. So that is why a person like entrepreneur exists, that you jump into something which the probability is less than 10% for you to
Navigating the oblivion.
a year. You still do it. And in my case, so these things frankly, I wouldn't have evaluated all the scenarios to take a call. I knew that I had to do something of my own, had to do back in Kerala. It was just question of when.
But why Kerala?
Just to do something in India and back home. This is my only thought process. Even when I was
Came
IIT,
back from INSEAD. When was that?
2007, 8.
7, 8, you came back from INSEAD, and then you thought I'll build something in Kerala. That was
Correct. So even at IIT days in fourth year, at least I was very clear I need to own a boat yard. That was very clear.
That was pretty good.
not a shipyard.
I didn't think at that time. So it's all like how your vision is based on what you are exposed to, etc. Right? So
That is incredible. I mean, I don't think any of my classmates who went to IIT, Madras or other places, they never thought of owning a software company or owning a product company. But here you're saying that you were an IIT and you wanted to own a boat yard.
Most people want to own a boat, not a boatyard.
Well, most of my classmates just wanted to go to the US, do an MS, and then wanted to work with Microsoft or Oracle or one of those
I'm
companies.
hopeful that all those people you mentioned who want to own a boat, they will be our client.
Yeah, there'll be slides. That's perfect.
That is the expectation. So this thought process is there. Yeah.
So you went to INSEAD, you graduated, and then you decided that, hey, I want to come back and set up something in Kerala.
You never thought about working in Europe, US after graduating?
No. So in the early days of INSEAD, so I had gone around in various yacht builders In Italy, I went to Ferry, a couple of places in Europe to explore what is the possibility. I realized there are a few limitations of me directly working because of language and other things. It's tough. Then I thought like, okay, this may not be the best time to start venture, but then I wanted somebody who might be able to support me in the initial handholding, which is where my brother-in-law came to it, to start that initial consulting venture, which I thought might be a easy way to start. Post NCR, obviously, you don't have any money. So you
have
start with
debt
And a big head loan.
and a big debt and
and then so you start consulting, which is manufacturing is next to impossible immediately.
yeah.
So take that 3-4 years.
So whom were you consulting then?
So the same boatyards who wanted good design or similar work for the large shipyards like the one project in Korea and all, right? What I was doing earlier to help them build those vessels there to build. So I went to Korea back in 2011-12 is one such project. And at that time also, in fact, I was involved in the world's largest combination carrier. It's like 320,000 ton carrying vessel project we were involved in a small way. It was a massive project. So a team of our
So you actually set up an original design house specialized in shipbuilding.
actually small boats here and for ships consulting and supervision, new building, small part of that big project or entire design of a small boat. This is what we started off with, a small team and build the team and build the capital to think of manufacturing. It took us 4-5 years to, while in that 4-5 years trying to experiment on some of the small boats I mentioned, right? Like the small tourism boat, which we also got the Limca Book of Records for the fastest solar boat then. And then the fishing boat. These are all experiments to establish some technology know-how, etc. But finally, this helped in arriving at what might be a possible solution for application of solar and electric, which is public transport and larger size, which it took us 4-5 years to figure, which is what that product market fit. I'm telling you, it took that 4-5 years to know that this is where the economics work. So day one, it was not clear to me.
This is absolutely brilliant because imagine if more Indian IT services companies had thought this way. They did services revenue, but they did know how and build products. Then I think we would have become a product nation a lot faster.
Just before the podcast, like he was doing the same point. Like Indian service companies, they didn't really invest in building product. They were very happy making monies.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic because when I first came across your product line and when you launched Aditya, I remember telling you what is his first ferry, right?
Yeah, that is also India's first solar
India's
ferry.
first solar ferry.
And where does it operate?
In Vaikam.
It operates in Cochin, Vaikam. I remember telling him, dude, this thing can go into riverways in a lot of places across the world, typically in emerging markets where urban mobility transportation is a challenge. Like, for example, Kerala, we're sitting in a place where you can solve mobility roadway problem if you have good riverways connected. And his product could actually go into like the Nile or Southeast Asia, a lot of these places.
Aditya is probably the world's cheapest per passenger kilometer. It's like 4 paise per passenger kilometer.
Wow, yeah.
4 paisa
Per passenger kilometer.
So 1 rupees again to,
I think the EV guys should hear him speak. 4 paisa
Per passenger.
because he has the scale, right? How big is the boat?
It's a 75 passenger ferry with about 70 or 67% energy from sun. If you take the whole year average. And that's the key to bring
So
down.
how does it work hybrid? So 70% is sun and remaining 30?
It's a grid. So it's no fuel on board. So typically when you shift from a pure diesel engine, which is cost of per kilowatt mechanical power is about 35 rupees. When you shift to electric with the grid cost of about 7 to 10 rupees in India, that becomes 10 rupees. Merely shifting to electric makes it 1/3.
35 to 10.
Yeah, 35. And then 10 to 3 when you shift
have 70%.
70%. So that's like 1/10 in OPEX straight away.
he should be on the Urban Mobility Planning Commission. No, I mean, like, this is incredible, right?
No, but entrepreneurs don't go on planning commission.
No, but I'm trying to say 4
They build things.
4 paise per kilometer. If you're moving 70 people, imagine scaling that to a couple of 100,000 people. you are impacting the planet in a very, very positive fashion. You're getting the people to do their livelihood.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. I mean, it's brilliant, right? For example, think
Tell us about the first ship you built.
So first public transport ferry or the first boat? So
Whichever is more interesting.
the more interesting is the first public transport or India's first solar ferry, Aditya. So Aditya's story starts with a problem of a state water transport department, a typical government-run public transport service. So typically one would expect the problems they face are like on a typical diesel boat, which is air pollution, water pollution, noise, vibration, smell of fuel, cramped space, etc. etc. These are typical issues.
you mean to like how people face in Gurgaon on an average day during commute.
Yeah. So, but also in India, when you tend to see a lot more, almost every month there are some boat accidents and people. Recently in Mumbai, almost somewhere in a month there is an accident related to either overloading or overcrowding, which practically means the boat stability margin is less. So these are some of the issues which water transport department would have faced like any other department using diesel ferries. So, but the added issue was on the cost of operation. So typically in a subsidized transport, which in the example of Vaikam, Tavanakad, 3 kilometer distance, it's a 4 rupee ticket, right? In that low price, which is even much cheaper than the bus, even in that price, you get the revenue on such a ferry would be like 5,000, 6,000.
So you're losing money daily.
Yes.
You're losing money all throughout
Correct.
the year.
On a diesel cost itself is about 10,000 rupees daily cost. So every day you run a boat, you are incurring loss. And in public transport, capex is not the issue. Capex is, there are so many ways of justifying capex as a long term, this, that, etc. Like Kochi Metro also use.
Right, exactly.
But OPEX you need to manage by the
It should be OPEX profitable.
correct. That is necessary in public transport. Like
Same with all metros all over India. So, right.
maybe Kochi Metro took some 3-4 years to achieve that, but that is a necessary thing to achieve OPEX parity. So this could never have been done for them. So and that is why they were looking for solar electric as a possible solution. Now we tend to imagine that you take a typical diesel boat, put solar panel on top, shift, remove the diesel engine, put motor. This doesn't work like that. So you need to do few things, and that is exactly what we had to do in that 3-year development time, which is first we reduce the weight of the boat.
So did you build a boat from scratch or you modified it?
From scratch.
We designed a boat from scratch.
Design from scratch. So one element of design is how to reduce the weight from a 35-ton boat to a 17-ton. So reduce by half, 50%. 50% by using lighter material like composites, aluminum instead of traditional steel wood. This is one aspect.
But why do you need lightweight boats for?
So the lighter the boat, less energy you need to move. So first step in design is to reduce the energy need. The second step is to shift the energy source. Right. So the first step is a necessary source to make it economical. So reduce the weight by half. Underwater shape optimization, which is what I was telling about. None of the boat yards have design play, right? So they don't have any design team. There's no investment in design optimization typically in any boat yard. So we could see the gap in the energy requirement if you invest in that design. So this kind of boats need about 45 kilowatt power, for example. This is reduced to 15. It's like 1/3 by good design. So that is a necessary step to even think electric or solar electric. So these are first two things. Then you shift the powertrain from diesel to electric, and this has to be marine grade systems, right? So both the powertrain and the battery side, marine grade systems. So today we are the only one in India who have the marine certified batteries, right?
So you had two teams, two separate P&Ls at this point in time. One for building the solar boat, the other was for your services business at that particular point in time.
Yeah, services was still very small, I would say, in where we are today, but that helped us build the team and survive as a company in the initial days, right? But that 3-year development time was to get these things right, to build that powertrain, battery. Then also even the battery choice, typically, if you just at that time when we went into this, we look worldwide, what is the chemistry in popular? It was like NMC all the way. Even in Europe, the ferries were NMC. China,
What is NMC?
automobile. So NMC is that nickel, chromium technology, which is a bit more unsafe, I would say, but it's very lightweight. The energy
It's an
density
alloy.
is high.
It's a composite material, right?
Composite meaning so
I think it's
basically
nickel, magnesium,
is chromium.
nickel, magnesium, chromium.
Yeah, so that makes it very light, but it's very unsafe. So many of this, you see the battery exploding and all. It's all because it's NMC chemistry with the low cost or low quality BMS. That's the primary. Could also be second-hand cells also. Many of the scooters are guilty of that. But our choice is very clear. We need the safer chemistry, which we choose LFP. So it's much safer chemistry. And today the world is shifting to LFP. If you see Tesla Model 3, new ones, China is entirely LFP now going to LFP. So that is a shift is happening. So LFP is what we choose at that time, which is just different from what typically was chosen, but
Different battery chemistry.
battery chemistry we choose for safety purpose. We choose for safety reasons. And then we also tried
Was it where LFP also more expensive than NMCs?
LFP. NMC would have been cheaper for the same functional purpose, but for the same safety, maybe it would have been the opposite.
So how did you convince the government to go with LFP?
Exactly the question. If you had to go through a tender process to get into the government, did you co-develop with the government, or were you showing them what you were building? How did that process work?
See, tenders, typically government will try to understand what is available in the market. So government also had appointed a technical committee, like Dilip sir you mentioned, right? He was leading that committee. He was trying to build a technical spec from a functional aspect and trying to study from various people what might be the chemistry, what might. Obviously, we also played a part in advising what we think, but they would also took this from many people to converge to certain technical solution. So this is one part of the batteries. Then also we had to try to increase the contribution of sun to that 67-70% to achieve that economics, right? So how to get that 4 pi cent, right? So you have to increase that contribution. So we typically a 75 passenger is a, let's say 15 meter by 6 size of maybe 4 buses, whereas we try to make it size of 6 buses, like 21 by 7, to increase the contribution of solar.
Wow.
Plus also increase the stability.
But didn't that make boat heavier?
You might say that it's slightly heavier than what would have achieved for the same smaller area. Yes, that is true. But still, a larger boat was lighter by half, which I gave you the numbers. Right? It's still 17 tons, it's half.
Which is 35 to 17.
70. So that, yet, although the boat was bigger, it still achieved that. Now, we made it larger, even for stability reason, that I told about the accidents and margin, right? So, we were very conscious that a 75 passenger boat in India means it could be 150 passenger in reality. Okay, so that's it. So
And then that compounds the whole safety issues and
to design like that, right? So that's a reality in India. We all know that. So even Aditya in Vaikam, where it operates during Vaikam Ashtami time, it's 150 passenger in the boat. And we are very confident that 200 plus people can safely go. And we have also told them, the rules, or you know that any of these rules are prescribing certain safety standards, that itself has a margin. So when I meet the rules for 200 people means 300 can safely go. That is obviously, there is also a safety factor there.
You have that margin of safety.
Yeah, we have 200 itself would meet the rule. So we are very careful in assessing all these things. So keep it wider and larger to achieve stability, etc. So all the problems are solved, plus bring down that OPEX from that 10,000 rupees to closer to 200 rupees in a day. So that is what we could achieve by this.
wait, so you managed to reduce the operating costs from 10,000 to 200 rupees.
That's 2%.
You saved so much money for the Kerala government. They should be giving you an award.
So they've given us a lot of orders, so we are very happy with that. So
Awards and orders, both.
yeah.
It has been wonderful talking to you. There's one question we ask everyone. We would like to ask you. Any great book you have read lately, or any book that has influenced your life, your thoughts?
So I read a lot of Talib. So, and I read those books multiple times.
He's one of my favorite authors.
Yeah. Anti-Fragile is my favorite.
Oh, wow. Yeah, great book.
And Skin in the Game is also very good book. Yes.
So, do you think you're anti-fragile? You have built a company which it thrives on disruption.
Typically, entrepreneurs are anti-fragile to the society, not to themselves. In the sense, society benefits from entrepreneurs. That is like as a whole, not individually. So, 100 entrepreneurs will improve the anti-fragility of the whole economy. But individually, they may be fragile. Yeah.
Exactly.
So brilliant parting thought, but I thank you again for being here, sharing those lovely insights with us. Again, today we are in a special place. We're hosting you in Cochin, your hometown. Thanks to the wonderful people at Raqqa. And I know a lot of my friends who are ex-REC alumni would love the fact that we are in Raqqa. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you a lot.